Welcome to Let's Talk with Dr. Robin. In this podcast, topics will be discussed that promote the daily management of life. While this information is meant to supplement your journey towards healthy emotional well-being, it is not intended to take the place of seeing a licensed mental health professional. I am Dr. Robin C. Wiley, a licensed clinical social worker with a private therapy practice in New Jersey. Thank you for joining today's conversation. Hello, everybody. So it's been a while since I've heard that intro because it's been a minute since we have been on air. And, you know, on the one hand, I want to apologize for that because I have been busy. There's been different things going on in my life that I've addressed. And so that has sort of I needed to reprioritize some different things. And so having said that, we are back. Welcome to Let's Talk with Dr. Robin. And I am Dr. Robin C. Wiley. And I'm a licensed clinical social worker, as the intro said. And I have with me Jason, who is my producer and makes me sound great on the air and clears up all the mistakes and that type of thing.
Hey, how you doing, Dr. Robin? You're right. It has been a while. It's been a while since I had that intro.
And I know I'm saying Jason when typically I'll say like Bryce. What I mean? So, it's been a minute, you know what I mean? And so we're regrouping. And,
it's all good.
And, with everything that's going on, many of us probably have had to take a minute and just kind of regroup and look at, sort of where we are, where we want to be,
right?
all those things.
Right.
And a lot has changed since, I think a couple of months ago when we had our last podcast, the world has opened back up.
Yeah, things have changed. I mean, we're back. There's some normalcy back, somewhat.
And then there's been some more challenges, you know what I mean, in recent.
The fear is coming back, though. Slowly but surely. Yeah,
with the Delta variant, people not being vaccinated, non-mask, the whole thing. Yeah. It's like a whole thing. So today's podcast, we're really going to just kind of like reestablish that we're back.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That was kind of our focus today. A little quick, little booster just to kind of, have people to check in, see what's going on. For us to check in, have a little discussion, what's been going on. You know what I mean? It's the summer.
Absolutely.
The summer is almost over, not quite.
But it's going fast though. And I mean, I still feel like it's June. Like sometimes I'm like, dang, it's August already. It's already August. But really, it's something else. But it's all good. You know what I mean? Like seasons change and you gotta navigate through them. You know what I'm saying?
And I think it's been good to try to take some time for self. Hopefully. And hopefully our audience has been doing that, with things opening back up and just taking the proper precautions. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, if you got a vacation, you got to do some, just taking the proper precautions. But I think also with people going back to work, in person, that's been a thing, and now upcoming, students, children going back, everybody's trying to figure out how
that's going to go and
Yeah. So that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Today, when I thought about, because I've of course been working on content for the podcast.
Sure.
I always think of different things, whether it's coming out of themes that go on, I feel like in my sessions with my clients or just stuff that's going on. But it's interestingly enough, in these past couple of weeks, I'm not a big sports person.
Okay.
But I'm a big Olympics person. Like when the Olympics comes out, I watch the Olympics.
So you've been watching it?
Yeah. I am Winter Olympics, Summer Olympics. I am on it.
Okay, that's good.
Which people who know me would probably be quite shocked to hear that.
So you watch all the different events?
I try to watch as much as I can.
Okay.
And depending, because of course this year it's in Tokyo. So, the time difference.
The time difference, absolutely.
So I literally have been up in the middle of the night, watching events.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay.
In real, because I like to watch it in real time.
Sure, absolutely.
And so, of course, the big I think, story with the Olympics, amongst other things, because I think there's new events that have happened in the Olympics.
Right.
And there's just been like, a lot of world records set. And of course, the U.S. has done really, really well.
Right.
We have, local people from New Jersey that have done really, really excellent, young folks. But, of course, what stood out to me as I was watching the Olympics was, Simone Biles and her sort of taking a stand for herself and, bowing out of some events, citing, well, first it was cited as like a medical thing. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, it's a medical. That's how the media put it.
But it really wasn't medical.
No, it was more mental health. And so it kind of brought to shed light on, I mean, not that it's anything new.
Right.
But I think it's something that the average person, we don't think about.
Right.
Which is, Simone Biles, who's like, all the, leading up to the Olympics, you saw all these commercials, you saw all this like hype about, she's the GOAT, greatest of all time, and she's fantastic.
She's really good.
She is.
She's amazing.
She is absolutely amazing. There are different gymnastics moves that are named after her.
Right.
She has won multiple gold medals, etc. She's looked to as like probably what you would almost call like an icon in the world of gymnastics.
Right.
And she's older.
She's kind of really pushed that sport forward.
Right. Time. I mean, not on her own. You know what I mean? She's got, there's a lot of people lifting her up, people who have come before her.
Sure.
And, I think going into the Olympics, because we have to remember the Olympics was supposed to happen last year.
Right.
And then it was postponed because of the pandemic.
Right.
So then you have all these athletes who have, shared their stories of trying to maintain that level of training.
Right.
And I think that's why I like the Olympics so much, because the backstories are so amazing for these athletes.
Right.
And not taken away from any other sport, like I said, but, these are individuals that literally practice, days on, they give up, they sacrifice so much of their life, like regular everyday activities, whether it's like postponing college or doing homeschooling or whatever the case may be. Their parents sacrifice a lot, or their guardians sacrifice a lot to get them to these practices and to these different meets or whatever. And a lot of times you think about it, it's all for getting to the Olympics and possibly doing an activity that is less than 5 minutes.
Right. So you train all year long to participate in an event that's like 5 minutes. It's almost, that sounds like, I'll be honest, just to make a little side thing. It sounds like my daughter's ballet. We go every week, sometimes 2-3 times a week for the one little recital.
That recital at the end of the year.
3 minutes.
She up in there for 3 minutes.
3 minutes, that's it.
Right. And so, a lot of work.
A lot of work.
A lot of work.
A lot of dedication, and I understand it.
So for anybody that's like maybe not been on the planet, in the last couple of weeks. So Simone basically, I think at first it was kind of like, she, people were saying like she didn't seem to be performing as well.
Right.
And then she basically, made the decision. She said she had like the twisties, which, I think at first I didn't really know what that meant, but they said, people in gymnastics knew what that meant. But it's basically a lack of mind-body connection. So when she would be in the air, which, in these events, she's in the air a lot. When you're in the air, you don't have a sense of where you are. You don't have a sense of, so she would not have that control of her body.
Wow. Okay.
Which could, she even took done some interviews. Yeah, it could be life-threatening. It's definitely be an injury, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And, and I think what happens is, and so she, she said, look, I need to take some time. I can't do this.
Right.
And and I think for the most part, people applauded her and praised her, but you're always going to have the people that are like, she gave up on her team and da-da-da. And, in a sense, her team rallied around and her team did good. And she also gave other people an opportunity to win some awards
to shine,
possibly would not have because they wouldn't have been participating.
Right.
They were alternates or whatever. So it kind of, to me, certainly she shed light also with like, Naomi Osaka, who also shed light on mental health and how, when we have these athletes that do really good and, we are great at uplifting them and labeling them as awesome and that type of thing, but not thinking about the pressure that they feel,
right,
the level of commitment that they have, and also what courage it takes to be able to say, I need to take a break.
I need to take a break. I've also heard it was some other things where they weren't judging her fairly. Like I'm not sure if you've heard that narrative, but that's a narrative that, because I guess in some ways I'm really disconnected. Like I'm disconnected.
And I think there have been some stories about that, you know what I mean? And, you know, like I said, I'm not, you know, she's done some interviews and she's talked about, you know, her own, you know, just how she's felt and that type of thing and all that. You know, I don't think she has said that. I don't think. I haven't watched every interview that she's done.
Sure.
But for me, what resonated with me was this pressure. And I think, you know, that pressure certainly as an athlete, but that pressure can be felt by anybody.
Absolutely.
When you achieve, when you're an achiever, when you're somebody who does, you know, well, people expect you to continue to do well.
Absolutely. Right.
And there can be this internalized pressure, whether people, because, you know, we're dealing with implicit and explicit messages. So it's the implicit messages a lot of times that get us. That is what we think people are saying or think people think that we should do.
Right.
And that can kind of, you know,
get the best of us, right?
It can get the best of you, you know, and it influences behavior, it influences mood, it can do all of that.
Sure.
And I'm not saying don't achieve, because, you know, obviously she's achieved a lot.
Right.
In a short amount of time when you think about her lifespan.
Right.
You know what I mean? Even though she's been doing this over a decade. Like, I think it's
and still to be very young.
Yeah, because you know, but in the world of gymnastics, though, she's not very young.
Right.
She's actually, because she's the oldest. She and another young lady were like the oldest.
Wow.
But, you know, I thought about the toll that it takes on one's mental health, like the toll that it takes to be an achiever, to be successful. And, you know, whether it's in sports, whether it's in whatever career you choose, whatever you're doing, because this is a career for them.
Right.
And for her to have that courage to speak out, but also too, for people to understand.
Right. No,
because I think that's the thing. We see these folks on TV and we're just in awe of them. And we're like, oh my gosh, like, you know, it's fantastic. You know, we see them do these like almost incomprehensible types of moves with their body.
Right. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? That many of us like, you know, I just can't even imagine.
Right.
And so we sit and we're entertained by that.
Sure. Right.
And maybe not always thinking about what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
And that the person is human. And that's one of the things she said. She's like, I'm human.
Right.
You know, and
so I you know, I have I have flaws. I have different things that happen to me. I know you look at me while I'm on, you know, the balancing beam or whatever events that she does. And you think that I'm just, you know, a novelty, superhuman.
Right.
But, you know, and that's what people see when they watch on TV, I think. And I think they forget that she's still a human being with emotions.
Right. And also too, looking at, you know, her age. I mean, you know, being that she's grown up in gymnastics, you know, being young, and I'm not even going to sugarcoat this. Also being a woman of color.
Right.
You know, because there is a certain pressure that also for people of color in general have, you know, many of us grew up in households where it's, you know, you always do your best.
Right.
There were other not gymnasts, but there were other Olympians that talked about that.
Right.
Other people of color. I can't remember the young man's name, but he is he was in track and field. And when they talked to him about winning, he brought up about, you know, growing up in his family and how, you know, always being instructed, you do well. If you're not, you know, if you're not first, then you're last.
Right.
So there is no such thing as second.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And again, going back to like those explicit messages, what we hear directly from people that influence us or whomever, and then those implicit messages and how that, you know, and I mean, I'm not taking away from people encouraging, because, you know, we need that encouragement. And sometimes that helps us to get where we are in life.
Right.
But sometimes it can come at a cost that we're not always prepared for.
And I think it sneaks up on us though, because I think that anytime that you're having that success, I'm sure you know that those things come, there's a price to pay for all of that.
Right. But if you're not careful, I would say that if you're not careful, which is where the mental health piece comes in, and being aware of how mental health, a lot of times we're very focused on our physical health, and we've talked about this before, but there's other types of health,
right?
And the mental health impacts the physical health,
right? Big time.
We have to get our mind right.
Right.
There's no way around that, and especially with situations where there is this pressure to achieve, to be successful,
right,
or to maintain success,
right?
And sometimes we also put other things on the back burner that can also contribute to our happiness and emotional well-being. We'll put those things on the back burner to continue to achieve that success, because that's where we feel like possibly the happiness and the fulfillment will come from.
Right.
And
trying to compensate for various different things.
Sometimes. Yeah. And I think, it's something to just think about. It really is, and I was really happy to hear this theme of, mental health is important.
Absolutely.
Taking care of our mental health and knowing what that means. For some, that means, talking things out with a therapist. That may not always be everybody's, as the young folks say, everybody's bag. That may not be everybody's bag to be, to talk to a therapist or what have you. Even though I do feel like there is a trend there that more people are deciding to talk to someone. Right. But the other part of it is it could just be just a self-care routine. You know what I mean?
How do you clear your mind? How do you, how do you clear your mind? How do you, you kind of decompress from, life's challenges and just be still, pretty much, you know what I mean? That's what it sounds like Miss Biles did, that she decided to just kind of be still, because from the time that she announced that she was, kind of like taking a hiatus until she came back and won the bronze, right? Because she did come back and win the bronze.
She was, on the beam.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long of a period.
No.
I think it just, she needed to hit the pause button.
Right.
And sometimes we all have to just kind of hit the pause button. So whatever, I think that happens to us. I think it happens to us more often than not, though, to be honest with you.
And sometimes that can be, different things. Because one of the things that came out, she had lost a family member. One of her family members that passed recently. And, I think, also just dealing with what's going on in the world. So it can be external stuff that's going on. It can be internal things that are happening, that sometimes we feel like, okay, when I'm dealing with everything, I've got all these balls in the air and I'm juggling them and everything is good. But then all of a sudden things happen.
Yeah.
And like you said, we don't necessarily recognize it, but we need to. We need to recognize when to hit that pause button, when to take a moment ourselves.
I was telling people, and again, I think, like I said, I'm disconnected from a lot of different things. Just for my own self-care, right?
And that's what I say. That can be a self-care thing too. Is to disconnect.
Right. Like my stepmom, she just watched the news all day, every day.
Yeah.
And you could tell like it has a toll on you. I'll be like, yo, you need to just turn the channel.
Yeah. Because what we have to realize about the news in particular, like I've said this to clients over the years, like, the news can provoke anxiety because also we have to realize how the news is set up. Yeah. So if you watch CNN or like these all day news channels or whatever, and nothing against them, but what happens is it's a loop. It's a loop. And so you hear the same story, even the local news, like you'll hear the same stories over. And the news typically leads with the tragedies and catastrophes and things that are not going well versus the story that's like 35, 40 minutes in about somebody who, saved somebody or some good hearted, some feel good story. Right.
There's more negative.
Yeah.
It's 90% negative and maybe 10% feel good.
Right. So I'm not saying, So I'm not saying don't watch the news, but I just say take 10 or 15 minutes and watch it because you're going to get everything you need from the news in that time frame. And then go on about your business and then watch another show.
Sure. So I think that her coming back, like I knew she was going to come back. I just, because you can't, as a athlete or a goal accomplisher, okay, you can't say, I need to stop. And then there's no get back. There's going to be get back. So I knew she would, I knew she would persevere.
Right.
I just didn't think it'd be that quick, but I'm happy it was. Right. But I don't even think that if I'm her, right, I think that she's satisfied. She's proud of herself because she achieved the bronze. But I don't think that I don't want to say she's satisfied. I'll say that she's okay with that she won the bronze. But I think that she internally, I think she's, when you train those things, you're always constantly going for the gold or going for the thing. So I think she's proud of herself. That bronze is like a gold medal to her and to the world because of all the enormous amount of things that she had to deal with. Right. But I think going forward, she'll chase that gold again.
Because I think, she's definitely about excellence. Right. You know what I mean? There's no doubt about that. Like, she has honed her craft and, that's something that I do believe she aspires to do. But I also feel like, it's good sometimes to be satisfied with what you have achieved versus what is not there.
Sure. I got you.
And that can sometimes be the struggle for the achiever because you want to achieve excellence in everything
all the time.
And sometimes excellence also equates to perfection. And so we need to sort of think about that in a different way. Sure. You know what I mean? And I mean, and I look, I'm an achiever myself. Right. You know what I mean? That doctor in front of my name is, that represents like, I think it's like 22 years of school. Right. You know what I mean? Right. So I've literally almost spent like half of my life in school. Right.
And so but there's a level of satisfaction with that level of achievement. I personally think for now, this is my opinion, because I always think you're forever achieving. So you'll get something and you'll achieve something. And you know what? That'll bring great satisfaction and comfortability, right?
Right. And it could be in a different area.
But it might be something else, right? So it's something.
Academically, that's I've achieved where I wanted to be. Right. Other areas of my life, just like, because, I'm human too, just like everybody else. Absolutely. So there are other areas of my life where there's some achievement yet to be done. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And so there, like you said, because I think as individuals, we want to grow in various areas of our life. And, we've talked about that, like those other areas of life. We talked about that, I think maybe in our like first or second podcast early on, where, all the, your spiritual side, your financial side, your emotional well-being, all those different areas where we may see that there's room for growth, and I think as we get older, there's always room for growth. Right. Like we don't, and I know like,
I think we're always self-assessing.
Well, and we should assess, we should assess, you know what I mean? But sometimes the assess has to sometimes it has to be acceptance too, because there's certain things about us that, are going to be the way they are. And sometimes that's tough to accept.
So maybe it's a satisfaction with self, but then a continuation of self-assessing. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I think it's just because what happens is the reason why the self-assessment. I mean, I do think people don't always self-assess. Okay, that's why people don't always know, like, well, this is what I do, unless somebody brings it to your attention, and that's sometimes where the relationships in our life come in. Sure. Whereas, if you're just by yourself, you can just do what you want to do because nobody's there to say, hey, you do this, right? Or you say that or whatever. Right. But when
if they're really your friend, though.
Right. If they're if it's if it's a healthy relationship. Right. Because sometimes people will just let us do what we're doing.
And they just
just let us keep on whatever. Right. But the people in our lives that bring those things to our attention, we may not always like to hear it. We may not always like how it's delivered. Right. However, I think the intent of it is genuine, and the impact of it can be good if we just take a moment and receive it and realize, okay, you know what? Here's the mirror, because that's what it is. That being in relationships or whatever, those are mirrors for you to say, look, because there's a person on the other side saying, hey, this is something you might want to take a look at. And then it is up to us to then reflect on that and either make the moves to do something different, or we also make the decision and say, well, I like how that is about me. I'm not changing nothing and whatever, which is sometimes a bit of a resistance. But
we got to have a perspective that in order to do that, I think that you have to have a perspective in order to be able to see outside yourself. Right. Because if all you are is just self-centered and you don't think that you're not above reproach, like you can't be corrected. Right. Then that's a problem. It's funny because I'm trying to design my office at work, right? Mm-hmm. Now that I know I'm gonna be there, So I'm trying to put some posters and quotes up. And one of the quotes that has to go up is the James Baldwin quote. It's my favorite quote. Probably my first. I got other favorite quotes too. But this quote says that pretty much, if I love you, I have to put you on to the things that you can't see. If I love you.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that before.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
if I love you, I got to tell you.
Right.
Now, you may not like it.
Right.
But if I love you, if I say I love you, I got to tell you the things that you can't see. Yeah. And I think that to be in a like you spoke of, healthy relationship, whether it's a friendship, whatever.
Right. Family, whatever.
Reciprocity has to be present in that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that, and that's where it comes from, the self-assessing, because, you're having trusted people, like you said. But my thing is, if you don't have, if I wonder, I don't know what life is. I don't know what life would ever be if we stop like reaching and dreaming or wanting to change. You know what I'm saying? Like that's like the desire or something that
I think it's just the thing is it's to me it's more about like achieving in various areas. So you're looking at the different areas.
And I totality, I got you.
Right. So it's not just like, okay, I just want to achieve at my job. I want to get like a promotion or whatever. It's like, let me look at the other areas of my life where there's still room for growth. So I agree with you, because I think even, I think when you, and I won't even say as we get older, like when you're like over the, like, you get over the age of 80, I think people are still trying to achieve, because it depends on what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like I know 80-year-olds that, hey, are out here traveling, doing their thing, whatever.
Driving the Corvette. I see
doing
everything. Old dude driving this. I mean, I was like, wow, he just went choo choo choo.
Doing their own thing. So, that's goals, definitely.
Absolutely.
But it also is about just like the balance of things. You know what I mean? And sometimes that balance is tough. Sometimes, we want to be, we'll say we want to be balanced, but how to get there. And I think that's a struggle. It's constantly working. So I think, going back to Simone, like for her, I feel like she was looking at, this is, I've done all this work to get here.
Right.
And I'm sure she had to tussle with making that decision and coming public and saying, I can't be part of the group. I need to back out. But in the interim, before she came back, what I love is that she still was present. She was there. She cheered on her team.
She was supportive.
Right. She, and she just looked like she could breathe.
Right.
She just looked like she could just take a moment and just breathe and be like, all right, you know what? I don't have to be like, what is Simone going to do? How's she going to, I don't have to deal with all of that.
Right. And
she was ready.
And they were supportive of her.
Yes, they were.
And that's the thing. And I think what we really saw was someone going through a trial and being surrounded by supportive, healthy relationships.
Right. And
that's what you saw.
And you know what? And in the end, that's what we need. We need that, because we need those supportive, healthy relationships to help us sometimes when we're down to get where we need to be.
Sure.
We need people in our lives that are going to be supportive, that are going to reinforce, our healthy emotional well-being.
But that's the main thing you just pointed on, to reinforce, because as much as we saw between the Team USA and Biles relationship and how healthy that was, what we also saw was a world that, well, at least some of the world got behind her, but a lot of the world was chastising her.
And I think that's because people don't understand.
Right.
Like, I think they don't always get it.
But the reinforcement of the relationships help her kind of like shield off that, all that net. Because if you don't have, it's like I told somebody one time, like, you could have all the hate in this ear, but you gotta have somebody speaking love in this here. Now, if you lose that person that's speaking love and all you got is this, you got a problem.
Right. And sometimes, and you're right. I mean, because sometimes, that love is coming in a way that we may not necessarily be open to receiving it, or we may not know how for whatever reason, or we may not believe it's significant, because all that plays into our early relationships, our early childhood stuff, how we've been oriented to the world in a sense. But she has that healthy support system, and I think that's what was key. That she knew there were folks that were backing her up
Right.
And, that were supportive of her no matter what. And that included her coach and, the folks who were, so people who invested time and energy in her literally looked at, hey, you know what, this is serious, obviously, if you're making this decision. But I also think, the people that don't understand, it's just like how people don't understand why somebody would talk to a therapist. It's the same thing. Or the same way how people don't understand how somebody would, take time out for themselves or whatever. Like, people have different views of things, based on their own situation or whatever. And, what we choose to do is not always for everybody to understand.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't care if you're a public figure or not.
Right.
It's not, everybody doesn't have to understand what you do.
Right.
It's just about respecting what I'm doing.
Respecting what I do. And I think that comes with, and I think, Ms. Biles demonstrated that. I think that comes with the knowledge of self. A knowledge of knowing who you are. When you know who you are, you don't really care what anybody else got to say.
And that's amazing that she has come to that at below 30.
Right.
Right. Because many of us don't get to that point until a long way out.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
I was like 38.
Yeah, it takes a minute. It does take a minute to really, have that awareness. And that goes back to awareness of self,
right.
That awareness of self and acceptance. Because I always feel like, to let go of something, you have to first accept that it exists.
Right.
Because a lot of times we think, I just need to let go.
Right. I think when I'm kind of surmising what you're saying, I'm learning and I'm analyzing, and I'm also analyzing, my life and other people's situations and my own situations. I think that, and it's something I tell my son, and I told others, like, Simone had to reach the point where it's like, hey, you know what? I gotta just take this blow. This, and some may conceive it as like a loss or an L, right? Mm-hmm. But I take it now in order for me to regroup.
Right.
And become a winner again. So sometimes it's like that song that's out. Sometimes you gotta lose in order to win again.
Right.
And
the thing is, don't get me wrong, but she did win.
And she won.
She did win. And she won a medal because she did win for the balance beam, but she also won in terms of like a personal victory.
Right.
She won in a personal victory because she literally made a decision that was for herself.
For herself.
So that's a win. So, when you make a decision that's for you, that will then lay a foundation for other things that you may do in her life. Because she's not always going to be doing gymnastics.
Right. It's bigger than gymnastics.
Yeah,
and that's what you're right. You know what? The loss was really a win.
Yeah, it was a win. It was a great win for her.
It's really a win.
And it's a win for probably more people. It's a win that will trickle to other people.
Right.
It's a wave. She started a wave. And don't get me wrong, I'm not taking out, Naomi Osaka, because she also did the same. She did a similar thing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? In terms of like, I can't do this anymore. Like the pressure of, being in front of the camera and all that kind of stuff.
Was she the one disconnected? Was she the one smoking?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm disconnected.
She's a tennis player. She's a tennis phenom, I would say.
Okay.
She's like, she has She's amazing. She also has there's a documentary about her that's on Netflix too.
Okay.
And young. She's very young. Okay. And so, being young and being in an industry where, everybody's, cameras, everybody's in your face trying to, and it was this pressure. And so she talks about it. And she bowed out of playing. Like she was like, I'm gonna take a break too.
Right.
And so I think what that does is it helps other athletes and other people maybe in general that will look up to, because you got to think these folks are like, they're role models, whether they want to be or not.
They are.
So to have somebody, Michael Phelps also, like, he didn't bow out of anything, but Michael Phelps talked about his struggles, with anxiety, ADHD, all kinds of other stuff.
I know he was smoking.
Yeah, right. He did have some, and I mean, and just the pressure that he felt. He talked about it kind of afterwards,
right?
But for them to be in the moment and what they're doing and say, look, this is too much for me.
Powerful.
I mean, it's a win in so many ways, because then there are other people out there who may look at them and say, wait a minute, I'm struggling and I'm trying to achieve, but I'm struggling. And so maybe I need to take a moment,
but also
regroup and then get back to whatever it is I want to do.
And also look at those losses, because I hate to say losses but I'm just categorizing it to a certain extent. But to see those losses as wins. So like if you lose a relationship or you lose this or you lose something, it's really a win. You know what I'm saying?
You may not know it's a win.
You may not know it at the time,
but eventually
it's
one door
win.
closes, another door
opens.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So like my daughter, she I don't know what happened, and Lord forgive me, I don't know if she misplaced her sneakers or somebody took her sneakers. I don't know. Okay, but she was very upset over these sneakers that have magically disappeared. I don't know. But what I said to her, I said, listen, you'll be okay. You're going to get this back twofold. And I tell you what, let me start with your new pair for your new collection. That's what we can do. We could, we could sit and keep.
And be grateful that, you have the means to recover.
It. Right. So, it's all about, like you spoke about, the healthy perspective, though.
Yeah. And changing our perspective, because a lot of times we have to relabel things, and I think, with their situations and, and sometimes with our personal situations, it's like, things are going to happen. Challenges are going to happen.
Right.
And it is how we perceive those challenges and what we decide to do next.
Absolutely.
That makes the difference.
Right. And
that's it.
And I think you spoke on it too earlier, the healthy relationships, because
those support systems are invaluable.
It's right. Because you could think you have a healthy situation or a healthy support system, but really all you have is people that surround you that's manipulating you.
Well, and you find out when you're down. A lot of times
you found your true friends.
When you're down and out, you find out. And the thing is with Simone, she saw that her team rallied around her. People all kinds of folks rallied around her. Like, she still got commercials. People are really talking about this element. Now, the only thing is, I hope that, now we don't shift to, because everybody's asking her about it, talking about it. And then that sometimes can be a lot too.
Yeah, be
overwhelming. But just like, what happens in the news, there'll be another story that comes along, overshadows that story. And
this will be done.
So, I think today, like, this was a good comeback. I think it was a good conversation for us to have. And we're going to be, we're back. So we will be on, you know what I mean? We will be, putting forth more podcasts.
It'll be a little more steady.
Yes.
That's the language.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit more steady. Because I have definitely missed doing this, and I see that more and more, like today as I'm talking. But as always, I'm Dr. Robin, and we just need to understand the importance of self-care, taking care of our mental health, and making that a priority at times. And I think like I said, I saw that in what happened in the Olympics in this time. And so going forward, we'll talk to you soon. But in the meantime, be well, be great, and be you. Thank you.